Hi, everybody, and welcome to Geeks Speak Louder Than Nerds, a weekly rewatch podcast for TV shows, movies, and a comprehensive guide for distinguishing a puppet from a real person. My name's Nick Farrow.
I'm Mike Hilty.
How you doing tonight, Mike?
Tired, so tired. I've been
We should take a
watch.
shot every time you start the show out with "I'm tired."
Man, maybe I need to get more sleep. No, I think the other part of this too is that I probably just need to manage my time a little bit better because I have a tendency sometimes to procrastinate. So right now, and Robert, I'm sorry if you're listening to this, you probably aren't, but just go with it. I've got a movie thing that I'm doing for the site that we both write for, Sif Pop, and I'm about two-thirds of the way through all the movies I need to watch. And then I still have to carve out 5 hours of my day to watch Killers of the Flower.
Finding time to do anything nowadays is just insane. There's like two movies that I want to watch right now that are streamers. I just found out that Five Nights at Freddy is also streaming on Peacock.
It
And I'm like,
is.
oh, I was not interested in that movie at all. But if it's available to watch at home, I'ma do that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's fun. I managed to carve out time to see Killers of the Flower Moon last night, and I was exhausted by the end of it. So we got out of Killers, and apparently the Five Nights at Freddy crowd got out at the exact same time because out of the other end of the theater just poured out apparently an entire high school's worth of children.
Oh,
And they all had a blast to the point where a group of them even stopped us as we were walking by and they're like, "Did you see it? Did you love it? Wasn't it amazing?" And we were like, "Whoa, whoa,
what are you
whoa."
talking
No.
about? What are you
Yeah.
talking about, son? What is going on?
Listen here, children. We were seeing the alleged masterpiece by Martin Scorsese, not your animatronic Chuck E. Cheese movie.
I watched Five Nights at Freddy last night, and then you mentioned Chuck E. Cheese, and most of these kids are like, "Who?
What?
What? What?
We
Huh?
still have
What's
one
going?"
in our area, so I think most of the kids there probably are aware of Chuck E. Cheese. It's still clinging to life.
Yeah,
I don't
we
know how. Health inspector tried to shut it down, but that's just not happening.
we have a Chuck E. Cheese, around where we live, and it's on the same corner as a now closed Krispy Kreme and a now closed Long John Silver. This is just not a good corner to be on
Chuck E.
because
Cheese survives, man.
Yes, so I did have a question for you. We're getting to the end of this season of Lower Decks, and I kind of wanted to ask you how you feeling about the potential for a renewal, because I think you mentioned before that this already has 5 seasons kind of locked and loaded to some extent or another. But are you concerned at all that Paramount Plus is going to be like, well, I'm not sure if you guys have the viewership to justify a fifth season?
Well, that's always the concern. Really, it's anybody's guess at this point, but now I might be just biased because I'm on like a ton of Star Trek social media groups. But it feels like this season has gotten a lot more traction than previous seasons. Like even in Star Trek groups in the past few years, I have not seen this much Lower Decks love. It's almost like after Strange New Worlds had the crossover, I think a lot of people jumped over and were like, "Let's see what all this cartoon show is about," because that episode, because the crossover is pretty highly recognized as being one of the best episodes of season two by people who haven't even seen Lower Decks. Everyone seems to pretty much be on the same page. Like that was a good episode. My hope is that Paramount Plus sees the boost in numbers this year and goes, you know what, let's let it ride. But then after last week's episode and this week's episode and kind of the way they're going with it, it almost feels like the writers are preparing just in case next year's the last year. Let's just make sure that, we cover our bases, and if it is the end, that it's not like a premature end that everyone then whines is like you canceled it before they were ready to cancel. Like we're not going to get a to be continued in the last episode of season 5.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'll be very curious to see what happens because, like you said, Paramount Plus is the big wild card here. Because as a streaming service, I'm not very impressed with Paramount Plus beyond its Star Trek content. I'm pretty hard pressed to find a show that I really like on Paramount Plus, at least for its original content. I know for me, I like the fact that some of Paramount's newer movies get on the service pretty quick, even if Mission Impossible isn't going to be on the service for a while because Tom Cruise is really picky about streaming services,
Yeah.
I guess.
Mission
Then
Impossible, which now has a new title and everything. Did you hear about that?
no, what happened?
So, Mission
Mission
Impossible
Impossible
7 Dead Reckoning Part
Part
1
One.
is no longer. It is now just Mission Impossible 7 Dead Reckoning. And
I
the
was about
next movie is going to be Mission Impossible 8, title TBD. They haven't picked the title for it yet.
I thought you were going to say that this was Mission Impossible 7 Live Die Repeat. That
My
would
God, that would right?
be like
What is it with Tom Cruise and not being able to stick with a freaking title?
well, I think Tom Cruise unfortunately figured out pretty quick that hey, maybe putting part 1 in the title isn't such a good idea.
I don't think they figured it out quick enough
Well,
because
obviously they
geez,
didn't.
there's just oh, I feel so bad for that movie. It's like the biggest consolation prize of the summer. Like I just feel bad for them because everything that could have gone wrong with the release of a movie did in their case. It wasn't a bad movie. It was a good movie.
But I think Tom Cruise is riding on the coattails a little too much of Top Gun Maverick and thinking that, hey, if we could have that success then, we could have the success now with not as strong a competition with Top Gun Maverick versus the Barbenheimer juggernaut that Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1
Yeah.
ran into. Like,
I don't know. It's wild to me that Top Gun Maverick received the accolade that it did and Mission Impossible went completely unnoticed. Because you would think that everyone loved Maverick. You would have to be a little curious to see what the new Tom Cruise movie is. And even if it is a Mission Impossible 7, like, what is Top Gun if not a Mission Impossible? It is literally an impossible mission that Tom Cruise goes on with a group of ragtag compatriots. It's just wild to me that everyone's just like, no, I'm not interested in Mission Impossible. It has everything that other movie had, just less jets. Like
maybe part of the problem is not so much the part 1 of the two-part thing, but maybe people are just kind of over the part 7
yeah,
of this.
maybe.
Fast and the Furious, how long did it take you before you eventually were like, I think I'm good?
After the first one,
Well,
I saw the first one in theaters, the second one, the third one, the fourth one. I watched them at home right before the fifth one came out because I was like, oh, the fifth one looks pretty good. Like I did not care at all. And when I rewatched all those movies, I was like, yeah, no, I made the right choice. There was no reason to rush out for these. You're right. The vast number of sequels in this franchise is high. Granted, since 4, I mean, if you really just count since 4, when they kind of reinvented the franchise, they've put out solid hit. Like they've made decent money. They've been all of them entertaining. Like I don't understand why people are like, oh, it's the seventh one. But I mean, Spider-Verse Part 1 came out in June. People were very annoyed about the Part 1. You had Fast
was
X, which came out, which also turned out to be a Part 1 in May, and it was the 10th Fast and the Furious. So it had so much working against it. So people were like, I'm not going to see another multiple sequel Part 1. Like, forget this.
but wait a second. Were both of those called part 1?
Well, Spider-Verse was, but a
Was
lot of
it?
people didn't know it. Yeah, it was. I
Well,
remember when they announced it
was
because
it
they
on the okay, I agree. When they announced it, yes, it was supposed to be
they
across the
sneaky
Spider-Verse.
changed the title later, but it was always announced. The original trailer said Part 1, Part 2, and then they changed it to Across and Beyond. So, I mean, a lot of people, but that's almost even worse because then they got to the end of the movie and the people who didn't know that it was a Part 1 saw that to be continued and was like, it's a Part 1. Like, they got
See,
extra mad.
but at the same time, I'd rather have those people get mad because they didn't know and the shitload of money that it brought in versus what happened with Mission Impossible where they included the part 1
Yeah.
everybody was aware that this was part one, and then it didn't make the money that it was supposed to.
This is true. They kind of gave everyone the benefit of the doubt, and they're like, "No, audiences are not going to shun us for being a part one," and they were so wrong.
Somebody clearly does not have any idea how audiences are feeling about anything from a movie theater standpoint. Do you think we should get into this episode?
Yeah, let's do it. This week we'll be watching season 4, episode 9 of Star Trek Lower Decks, titled The Inner Fight.
Once upon a time. Now this is a story all about how.
Have you ever had a dream you want to do so much you could do anything?
We open up on an away mission with Mariner, Boimler, and the triumphant return of T'Lyn.
It's about damn time.
She's back.
Yes, she's back.
She doesn't really do a whole lot.
She
in this
doesn't do
episode.
anything in
She's
this
like
episode.
background dressing.
There is something comforting about having her back.
Granted, it could have been T'Lyn. It could have been a cardboard cutout of T'Lyn that they were actually just carrying around with them. I don't know. But she didn't really do much. But it was still fun to see her back.
Carrying T'Lyn around Weekend at Bernie's style. Yeah.
Well, on this away mission, they're finishing up the installation of a new energy barrier on a science research outpost. T'Lyn asks the scientists what exactly their area of research is, and the head scientist says the venomous tremble lizards. Boimler doesn't like the sound of this. These things sound like nightmare monsters, as the scientist describes all of their features.
Their skin's drenched in neurotoxin, and their blood is a corrosive acid. Oh, and if you touch them, your eyes shoot out of your head! Oh! Well, we don't want that.
Why they would be super into these weird, like, deadly aliens, who's to say? But like caves, Mariner's not a fan of research scientists, so she immediately feels the need to point out that if they just joined Starfleet, they could, study a new alien every week. But this guy is so in love with these creatures, one could say the Moopsie is Narja's favorite. So just then we cut to the outside of the facility where we see one of these cute little feathered creatures that bear a striking resemblance to Baxter Stockman's Mousers from the Ninja Turtles. He's biting through some exposed wires on the fence. The fence shuts down and the scientist immediately screams,
Oh no, those monsters are going to kill us all! What? I thought you loved them! Only when the fence is up!
harkens back to episode 2 and gives the venomous tremble lizard equivalent of the Moopsie drinks your bones.
So true.
The tremble lizards descend upon the compound like a swarm of compies on that little girl from Jurassic Park.
Hey,
The Mariner immediately springs to action and leaves behind the venom suit, much to Boimler's dismay. But she charges outside with a pan and is banging real loud and getting them all to follow her. She's like blocking their venom spits as she like single-handedly repairs the shield and like hangs on to it with like one hand, and she manages to fix the shield, jump back into the compound, and everything is back to normal. Boimler is a little annoyed at Mariner because of her recklessness. Turns out she didn't get them all. There's a tremble lizard on her back, which immediately jumps and attacks the lead outpost scientist.
My eyes! Oh, he wasn't kidding about the eye thing.
And it's screaming outpost scientists with exploding eyeballs to opening theme.
it's kind of weird. Mariner doesn't like a whole lot of anything this season.
She's
does
got
she?
opinions, yeah.
That's fine. Have opinions. It's all good.
I get the distaste for outpost scientists. From her perspective, she joined Starfleet to do her own kind of science and exploration and solve puzzles and mysteries of the universe. And it feels like a good 20% of Starfleet missions is going to these outpost scientists to help fix something or have to kind of solve their mystery of the week instead of doing one of Starfleet's own. And usually it's because somebody did something conniving and Starfleet got roped into it. I get it. Outpost scientists are kind of a pain in the ass.
Oh, well,
There's
okay.
plenty of examples where this is always a problem.
All right. For somebody that doesn't know anything about outpost scientists, okay. I would like to subscribe to your newsletter about your disdain for outpost
They're the
scientists.
worst.
All right. Back on the Cerritos, Tallinn, Boimler, Tendi, Rutherford, and the senior staff are called to a meeting with the captain. They all take note that Mariner is suspiciously absent. The reason why they've been called in is to answer the captain's very specific question.
Why is my daughter trying to get herself killed?
You noticed that too, huh?
Mariner has been behaving more and more reckless since her mission on Ferenginar, and there is a fine line between trying to be a hero and being out of control. Unfortunately, they can't make figuring out Mariner's supposed death wish a priority. They have a mission to complete. Up until now, these strange attacks have been targeting non-Federation ships only. However, now someone is targeting former Starfleet personnel. There are 4 in particular that ships are being dispatched to collect for their safety. So there's 7 of 9, Beverly Crusher.
Oh my God, we're gonna meet Beverly Crusher? No.
Thomas Riker, and Nick Locarno. The Cerritos has been assigned to locate Nick Locarno, who is getting by as a pilot for hire on a seedy crime planet.
Yes. So I have a list of things to go over those name drops, but there's one that I want to go over now, and we'll catch the others in the reference section. So Nick Locarno, he is the main MacGuffin of the episode. He's actually from season 5, episode 19 of Star Trek: The Next Generation, titled "The First Duty." Locarno was a team member of Wesley Crusher and a Bajoran cadet named Cito, along with 2 other cadets, and he was the head captain of the flight team. These guys were like the coolest guys on campus. Like, everybody loved them. So for the graduation ceremony, they were going to perform this maneuver that was actually banned by the Academy like 100 years ago because of how dangerous it was, called the Covert Starburst maneuver. And while practicing that maneuver, one of the cadets either messed up or something, but essentially they ended up crashing, destroying all the ships, and only 4 of them managed to emergency transport out, killing one of the cadets. The Enterprise was en route to Earth because Captain Picard was giving the commencement speech. And so they got involved with the investigation. And naturally, they're all like, "Oh, Wesley, we know you're not lying about what happened," because they told the committee that they don't know what happened. Like, they were just doing some random exercise training and there was an accident and there was no like visual comms because they were like going past the moon or something. And so it then eventually comes out that the ships were in the wrong position, and Picard immediately figures it out. So he calls Wesley to his office and has him pretty much say, like, "Listen, I know exactly what you guys did, and you need to stand up and tell the truth." And he gives this amazing speech.
The first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth. It is the guiding principle on which Starfleet is based. And if you can't find it within yourself to stand up and tell the truth, you don't deserve to wear that uniform.
It's one of the bests in the series. And Wesley wants to come clean, but Nick Locarno is the superior officer in this situation. He convinces Wesley to keep his mouth shut. But in the end, Wesley does speak up. He tells the truth, and Locarno ends up taking the fall for everyone. He pretty much goes in and says, "They were acting under my orders. You can't expel them, just expel me." So he gets expelled from the Academy, and the rest of them all kind of have like a mark on their record for the year. So that's who Nick Locarno is. So to see him pop up again was fun.
Context makes a lot more sense.
I was debating whether or not to have you watch those episodes prior to this, but then I was like, no, let's see what he thinks of the episode without the knowledge.
I mean, isn't that kind of my role
I guess
in this
it could be.
in this whole thing? Is I'm the Star Trek dummy who doesn't know anything about the context, and you're gauging to see whether or not I actually enjoy all of this stuff without the back knowledge, which I am for the most part, but the back knowledge does kind of help.
I felt like it was a toss-up. I almost felt like it was manipulative to not tell you, because it's like, oh, there are 2 episodes of TNG that are like must see television if you're going to watch this episode next. And I actually had my daughter watch both of them. And at the end of the second episode, she was like super upset with what had happened. And then when Mariner tells her story later, she was like, "Oh my goodness, she was friends with her. Oh, I can't believe that." And I was like, that's exactly the reaction you wouldn't have had you not watched these episodes. Like, she was really into it. I was like, "No, let's see what Mike thinks of the episode without this knowledge."
Well, I'm glad that you chose your daughter over me in this instance. So Freeman explains that Locarno's presence may cause Mariner to go further down the rabbit hole of dangerous behavior, so she wants suggestions on how to keep Mariner distracted. Tendi suggests that there's an old space buoy on the Sherbal system that recently stopped transmitting data. It should be the safest mission ever, but their plan is to play it up to be super dangerous to entice Mariner. Freeman agrees to the mission and gives the lieutenant junior grades her heartfelt thanks.
So then we cut down to the shuttle bay, and Mariner is excited for a girls' trip and Boimler mission. She asks where they're going, but T'Lyn says that not telling her would make the mission 2.47% more dangerous. So Mariner loves this idea and decides to not press them any further. But when they get to the satellite, Mariner is super annoyed. She doesn't think this mission is dangerous at all. This is where I'll mention my only holdup in this episode is Mariner's sudden death wish feels a little out of nowhere. Last week, we did see that there are dozens of missions that we don't see. And they do mention it briefly here, like, oh, Mariner, last week she jumped out of a shuttle because she thought she was attacking a Borg, but it was just a pile of junk. So, like, she's obviously been showing this tendency more, and they mentioned like since the trip to Ferenginar it's gotten worse, but it just feels like we only saw it this one time, and I would have liked to have seen more. But it really just it boils down to I just want more episodes of the show. Like, I'm tired of this 10 episode nonsense. Give me 24.
You'll get nothing and like it.
Like, it used to be 24 to 26 episodes a season, and I loved every minute of it.
You'd be hard pressed to find any show on a streamer nowadays that goes over 10, 12-ish episodes or so. But you're right. It did feel like it came out of nowhere. Maybe if they had kind of expanded Mariner's frustration with being promoted more into kind of having that gradually evolve into more and more reckless behavior, I think I would have gotten more on board with that, but they didn't. There was a couple episodes where Mariner was just perfectly fine. So
yeah, I think the most reckless we could say she's been since Ferenginar was when she jumped out the airlock after Rutherford. But really, Rutherford was being reckless, so it felt more like she was just trying to help her friend as opposed to get herself killed. But I don't know. It just these moments sometimes feel disingenuous because of the fact that there's so few episodes and it feels like they're just springing this new information on us.
Do you think part of the problem is that these episodes are contained to 25 to 30-minute episodes? Do you think if they expanded the episodes a little bit more that we could get as opposed to more episodes?
It's hard to say because I suppose if you add an extra 10 minutes to an episode like this, you do get another scene or two where you can put them in a situation where she could, like, in this case, act out and be reckless. But I don't know. I feel like the length and the runtime of this particular show really works in their favor because it allows them to do a Star Trek mystery of the week, but with some comedy, and it never outstays its welcome. And I think that's kind of why this show is becoming more of a hit. The show doesn't do more than it needs to do. It rarely feels like they had to leave something on the cutting room floor to keep it within that time limit. As the team is trying to convince Mariner of all the potential danger that this mission entails, Tendi notices that the satellite has stopped transmitting data, not because it's broken down, but because someone tampered with it. Just then, the camera pans out and we see that they're being watched through the viewport of a cloaked Klingon bird of prey.
We cut over to the Cerritos arriving at New Axton, twice as lawless as Old Axton without any of the charm. The planet appears to have an energy field surrounding the whole planet with one big gateway to allow ships to pass through. Freeman, Shax, and Ransom are discussing the planet and how they'll need to act like criminals if they want a chance to complete their mission.
Moss Iceland Spaceport. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. We must be cautious.
When a hail from the planet comes through. And the dude on the other side is super pissed at them for just idling the car in orbit. He says just because they don't kiss Federation butt, that doesn't mean they don't have rules.
But I thought you famously don't have rules.
He tells them to go park their ship by the moon and they can take the shuttle, which comes by every few hours. Just then, a bounty hunter ship enters the system and they wave him through. This annoys Freeman because why doesn't he have to park on the moon?
Because he's special.
Obviously.
He had one of those special placards that he can put up on his dash. Bounty hunter parking. So back on Sherbal, the team's shuttle is pulling away from the satellite when suddenly their proximity alarm goes off. The bird of prey decloaks right behind them, so Mariner grabs the wheel and flies towards the planet, but their shields are inoperable.
This is your fault. You wish for this.
Tendi manages to activate the emergency transport and beams them all to the surface just as the shuttle is hit with a torpedo. On the surface, they are trying to figure out what just happened when they suddenly hear sounds of people fighting in the distance. Mariner's ready for a fight, and much to the dismay of her teammates, she charges off without giving it a second thought. After running all the way through the commercial break, they stop to take a quick rest, but Mariner is still raring to go.
How's your adrenaline still so high? Mine were off like 2 panics ago.
Mariner says that somewhere out there is an apex predator, and she wants them to know that she is the new apex predator around here.
This is just another example of how this is just all coming out of nowhere because, yeah, she's not one to shy away from a fight or anything like that, but she's not actively pursuing fights, and she certainly doesn't want to be this new apex predator.
Well,
again, it just felt a little odd.
I agree. In this moment, it definitely does. I like the explanation she gives later. It clears up the concerns that I had. And I've noticed that this show does this a lot, where they will present a problem that annoys me initially, but then is quickly dispelled. Like in the episode where T'Lyn is getting super frustrated about the comm not going through. And it's like, okay, well, why would T'Lyn be illogical like this in such a manner? And it's like, oh, because she's kind of suffering from a thing that's making her go bonkers. So, okay, like it makes sense by the end. And maybe that goes back to what you were saying. Like, would 10 more minutes in an episode fix these little things? And I think, yes, maybe. Like, we just have to kind of deal with the fact that they don't have a ton of time to sit in these moments, so they have to throw them out, try and make them funny, and then move on. Don't worry, it'll all make sense by the end.
It's a credit to them for trying to make a story each episode, and kind of the nice thing about having something not so serialized on TV, because you don't get a whole lot of those anymore.
So good news. Tendi managed to use her tricorder to download the data from the satellite, so that they could have an easier time traversing the terrain until a rescue can arrive. But just then, down below, they see a Ferengi and a Romulan are fighting with spears. If you'll remember, back in episode 2 and episode 5, these two characters were actually the leaders of the ships that got taken by the mysterious ship. They're fighting back and forth, and the Romulan seems to have the upper hand when the camera cuts to over his shoulder, where we can see a dark figure watching from a tree behind him. The figure then jumps down and looks like he's about to attack the Romulan, when the Romulan stops and is like, come on, a little closer, and the figure's foot gets caught in a snare. Because as it turns out, the Romulan and the Ferengi were putting on a little stage production of Trick the Klingon. This Klingon is all decked out in what looks to be like animal furs and bones, and he looks pretty badass. We cut back over to our team, and Boimler suggests to T'Lyn and Tendi that they should stay hidden till they figure everything out. Unfortunately, Mariner is not there to hear this, because this is a problem that kicking can solve also. She kicks the Ferengi out and starts on the Romulan.
Starfleet! Not so tough when you haven't tricked someone, huh?
While she and the Romulan are fighting, they notice that the Klingon has broken free. He immediately knocks Mariner into a tree really hard and goes after the Romulan himself. While they are fighting, Boimler, Talin, and Tendi quickly run in and drag Mariner out of there.
Choices have consequences.
Yeah, right?
In moments like this, like sometimes just think before you do something. Look at me. I'm getting all parental here.
I know, right?
Back on New Axton, Shax, Rutherford, and Freeman are disembarking a shuttle with the plan to find Locarno, who was last seen in the pickpocket district.
Well, joke's on them because these pants don't even have pockets. Wait, they do! Captain, did you know we have pockets?
They head to Mudd's, a dive bar where they should be able to get intel on Locarno's whereabouts. It's a good thing that the captain aced her hoodlum and racketeering class at the academy. She should be able to get what they need. Did you take a hoodlums and racketeering class in college?
No, I decided against that one. I took Pickpocket 101. It was kind of just like a fluff course.
Here I am, this idiot who took Introduction to Sociology. God. The bouncer at the door stops them and asks if they have a reservation. Freeman tries to pretend like they are a rough and tumble gang and they want to have some drinks and make trouble. The bouncer is clearly annoyed by the poor attempt.
Look, I know you're Starfleet. You're in full uniform.
Once again, they are being accused of thinking they're better than everybody else. Freeman sheepishly claims they don't and asked if they could be put on the list. The bouncer says sure, but it will be a 2-hour wait, even though they can clearly see that the bar is pretty much empty with the exception of just a handful of people. Annoyed that they don't have 2 hours, the bouncer suggests that they go across the street to Zorky's, but the black market intel is less reliable. Just then, the bounty hunter from earlier, who got in through the shield without waiting, walks up and is let right in. Turns out bounty hunters get priority seating on this planet. So they get priority parking, they get priority seating, they get premium access, they get fast pass. Once again, much to the annoyance of the captain.
Did this come up in your seminar?
No, it did not.
We cut back over to Sherbal, where the team is comparing notes about what they saw. Mariner suggests that the Klingons are up to something. This is just like when that bird of prey attacked the Cerritos during the battle with the Packlids. Talin then realizes that they were all in that battle together. It's a fun moment of realization that I feel like we didn't need, but I kind of was like, oh, that's fun. They figured out that they were all there together. But before they can discuss the Battle of Wejduj, a Cardassian jumps from a tree and pins Boimler by the neck. Mariner starts to charge to save him, but Talin jumps in with a Vulcan neck pinch and takes him down.
I could have handled that Cardassian, you know. I have no doubt you would have tried.
Talin then suggests that they find shelter to avoid more attacks, and Tendi leads them to a giant tree. Mariner is annoyed that Talin jumped in and didn't let her fight the Cardi. Once safe in the tree, and Boimler is done whining about the sticks in his boots, Tendi suggests that if they find the monitoring station connected to the satellite, they can repurpose it and make it a beacon to send us a stress signal out. They are able to locate the station from where they are, but unfortunately they can see campfires coming up from the trees, which indicates more opposition directly in their path. Boimler suggests that they take the long way around, but Mariner doesn't like that plan.
I've seen Tendi sword fight, and Talin can clearly throw down. We got this.
Her attitude here causes them all to have to come clean. And they admit that the captain ordered them to keep her from putting herself in danger, which Mariner is immediately defensive about. She is super annoyed that they would not only hide that from her, but also think that she's trying to put herself at risk. Because how dare they?
Spoken like a true individual who puts themselves in danger on a consistent basis. Classic lashing out.
They try and get her to say what's wrong, but she's done talking to them. So she suggests they can go around the long way. Fine. Let's get some sleep because she's tired of everyone being a dick to her.
While they're all asleep, Mariner sneaks out.
Teach me how to tap dance, Beverly Crusher.
So it's not long before she's confronted by the Klingon from earlier, who turns out to be Ma'a, the lower decker turned captain in the episode A Wage Duj, who we last saw in the post-credit scenes of the season 4 premiere. He's not happy that she's trespassing on his domain, but since this doesn't look like Kronos, Mariner is happy to throw down.
I like how Ma is giving Mariner some leeway for having saved him earlier. Like
Mhm.
he doesn't just come out and attack her. He actually confronts her and is like, "Hey, get the hell out of here."
The dynamic between these two is really great. They kind of complement each other in a weird way.
They
which
do.
is-
Ma'a's a fun Klingon. I like him.
Mhm.
I've liked him since his episode in season 2. I was actually really hoping that he too might become a Starfleet, but I get why they didn't have the ability to do that for all the characters that we like. So.
Mariner, of course, is still unhinged, so she decides to insult him rather than respect his wishes, and he just loses it on her.
Our battle will be legendary.
Ma'a and Mariner trade blows, and they're really beating the snot out of each other when suddenly we hear what sounds like a knife going through Ma'a's back. He turns, and there's a shard of glass sticking out of his shoulder. The sky thunders, and Mariner realizes it's a glass storm. They both stop fighting and take off running, looking for shelter.
Gotta hate it when that glass starts falling from the sky.
Are
The
glass storms just a thing in Star Trek? Or
I mean, some planets have glass storms. Yeah, why not?
you say that so matter-of-factly as if like, yeah, just it.
Don't we have a planet in our own solar system that has glass storms? Isn't it like Saturn
Maybe
or Venus? One of the two. It's one of the middle ones. Like
that
the
that
middle
was a
ones
trick.
is it like between Pluto and Earth, like the 6 in between. One of them, I believe, has glass storms. Mariner and Ma'a find shelter in a cave.
I hate caves.
So while they're waiting out the stupid, dishonorable knife rain storm so they can fight each other, they're kind of brooding on their own sides of this cave. There's clearly not enough room to fight in this cave because it's too cramped.
Wouldn't you think to some extent or another that there would actually be a little bit more honor? Because if you just throw in like an additional wrench, like there's not enough space, wouldn't that victory just mean a little bit more?
I mean, I suppose they could go Jason Bourne style, like close up street magic fighting, but the Klingons, they like to have room to throw people around. It makes sense. Ma'a's
So-
like, there's not enough room for proper combat in this cave.
Tell that to Captain America in an elevator in Winter Soldier.
Klingon warriors are more like the Hulk than the precision of a Captain America.
Okay.
They need a lot of breathing room.
If you want to learn more about my thoughts on Winter Soldier, tune in to our next episode of Loki coming up in a couple days.
And if you want to know my thoughts, listen to last week's episode.
Call that a plug.
Mariner accuses his bird of prey for being the reason they're stuck on this planet, and Ma'a explains that his traitorous crew mutinied and left him on the planet to rot. Ma'a is confused by Mariner. She is Starfleet, but also a warrior. These two things don't often go hand in hand. Mariner disagrees with him. She's not a warrior. Her mind just becomes more clear when she's fighting or in a dangerous situation. It really, really clears up when someone's trying to kill her. Ma'a then acknowledges that she is waging a war within herself, hence the inner fight of the title. Since their upcoming battle will most likely result in one of them being dead, Mariner finally gives in and opens up. She explains that she's upset about her recent promotion. Ma'a takes this to mean that she hates Starfleet, but she shoots him down. She actually loves Starfleet, or at least what it's supposed to be. Her dream in the academy was to be a captain. She modeled herself after her perfect friend, who was a few years older, a friend named Sito. She explained that even though Sito made some mistakes during school, she didn't let it stop her. Sito wanted to be an explorer, and when she graduated, she was stationed on the Enterprise.
The Enterprise. I have heard tales of its triumphs.
This upsets Mariner because it got her murdered by Cardassians. This is story time number 2. I told you about Nick Locarno. Now it's time for me to tell you about Sito. In episode 15, I think, of season 7, so the last season of The Next Generation, this episode is called Lower Decks and is actually the template for which this show is based. It was an episode where a group of ensigns are the main characters for that episode. And these are all ensigns that we've never seen before, except for Cito, who we did see in the first duty episode with Nick Locarno. Cito is pretty much the main character of the group, along with her friend Sam, who is another ensign, very Boimler-esque. He gives Riker at one point in the episode an aye, and Riker's just like, one eye will do. And he's like, why does Riker hate me? You get to see the entire episode from the perspective of the ensign. So whenever something big happens with the bridge crew, we don't, as an audience, get to see what we normally see in these episodes. And so we're left kind of in the dark the way that the lower decks crew members are left in the dark as well. At one point, Cito is called to the captain's ready room, and Picard really gives her a dressing down. He tells her that she is just reckless from that incident at the academy.
Sir, I know I should have told the truth right from the start.
Yes, you should. But you didn't. What do you think that tells me about your character?
There are so many more deserving Starfleet officers to be on the Enterprise than her.
As far as I'm concerned, you should have been expelled for what you did. Quite frankly, I don't know how you made it on board this ship.
And really, this is a test. It's a test to see if she's the right person for a very dangerous mission that he has. But he kind of lays into her to see if she's got what it takes. She's, of course, devastated by being called to the captain's office and just getting railed into. So she's kind of sulking about it, and Worf, being her bridge buddy, in a training exercise with her, he makes her go blindfolded while he proceeds to like beat her up, and she finally takes the blindfold off, and it's just like, what the hell? This is bullshit. You keep knocking me down. And he's just like,
Perhaps next time you are judged unfairly, it will not take so many bruises for you to protest.
so she goes back to Picard, and she stands up to him and pretty much says, like, I've worked hard to be here, and if you didn't want me here, then you shouldn't have agreed to let me be stationed here. And this is when Picard opens up and says that she's stationed on the Enterprise because he wanted her there.
I do know why you ended up on the Enterprise. I asked for you. I wanted to make sure that you got a fair chance to redeem yourself.
Thank you, sir.
And it's a really touching moment. So she agrees to go on this volunteer mission where they need to get a Cardassian spy back into Cardassian territory. The plan is she's going to pose as a Bajoran prisoner arrested by a bounty hunter and being brought back to Cardassia for trial. And then what they're going to do, as soon as they cross the border, he's going to put her in like a torpedo tube and shoot her back across into Federation space, and then the Enterprise will pick her up. And that way, if like they get pulled over by any Cardassian cops on the border, it all looks like it's on the up and up, and the Federation gets to keep its spy. But unfortunately, the ploy does not work. And when the Enterprise gets to where they're supposed to pick her up, all they find is wreckage of a torpedo tube. And Cito is lost. And this is probably the most emotional episode of the entire series for me. Like, it's one of my favorites, and I can't not cry when it's on. And I mentioned earlier I had my daughter watch this one, and I could see she was getting upset, and she looked at me and she goes, I didn't want Cito to die. And I'm like, yeah, no, that is a pretty rough moment in that episode. But it's one of the most touching moments then, because Picard gives a speech to the entire crew, letting them know that Cito was lost.
It is my sad duty to inform you that a member of the crew, Ensign Cito Jaxa, has been lost in the line of duty. She was the finest example of a Starfleet officer, and a young woman of remarkable courage and strength of character. Her loss will be deeply felt by all who knew her.
You see how it affects everyone. Worf, who is her bridge buddy, her friends on the lower decks, they're all affected by this. And he pretty much said that she is the epitome of a Starfleet officer. So we cut back to Mariner, who this death destroyed her.
Mhm.
Cito was one of her best friends.
Question for you. Because I'm trying to rack my brain, trying to remember if is Cedo mentioned at all in Lower Decks?
If she was ever mentioned, it would have been 100% in passing.
Okay. I guess that's why for me, maybe this moment didn't hit me as hard because this is again just another thing that just felt like it came in.
I 100% agree with you on that. So, like we talked previously, what is the bug up Mariner's butt that's causing her to be so reckless and emotional? I had thought maybe she was put in charge of somebody and somebody died under her command, and that's why she doesn't want to do it. This whole thing kind of rings a little false because it's a retcon. Mariner didn't exist when that episode existed. We were unaware until this episode that Mariner was even in the academy at that time. I love the connection. I absolutely love the connection to the original Lower Decks episode because that's at the heart of this show. That episode is the reason this show exists. And so them connecting the two like that is really cool to me. But we never got to see Mariner and Cedo together. The fact that Mariner is becoming so reckless because this is what's been bothering her feels a little false. I like that they're doing it like this. It goes back into the whole, I really wish we had one episode that told us prior to this that she knew Cedo.
Yeah. Give me a 5-minute flashback or a whole episode
or little hints.
Show
hints
me
that maybe make you connect the dots.
Show me. Don't just tell me. Show me what happened.
Well, so now here's the other side of that coin. It does ring false for me, but where this episode ends almost implies to me that this isn't the last we're going to hear of this. Because Nick Locarno was in that episode, and at the end of the episode, Mariner is with Nick, it feels like next week we will get more to this story. Like it won't just... And so it's going to do like Captain America, the first Avenger, really gets better once you see Endgame and everything else that comes after. I feel like once we see episode 10, it'll inform on episode 9 in a way that will kind of make us feel better about it feeling just dropped in there. If that makes sense. Or at least that's my hope.
That's the hope.
I'm really excited to see where this goes next week. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, Mariner is devastated by Cedo's death. And Mariner also is upset because, right after that, she had to fight in the Dominion War. And even though Ma'a's impressed by that, she says, no, the Dominion War was awful. There was no honor in it. It was only massacres. Starfleet is supposed to be about puzzling out mysteries of life, not fighting wars. This is the catalyst for her entire downward spiral. She says, if being an ensign was good enough for Cedo, then it's good enough for me. And before I could even say, that doesn't make any sense, Ma'a calls her right out on it. He pretty much says,
Cedo was a warrior. You do not honor her.
It sounds like she was a top-notch ensign. She did what was necessary. Hey, listen.
Cedo made her choice. You want to solve puzzles and mysteries? Your friend gave her life to protect that.
If you're not going to honor her for that, the sacrifice she made for you, then, you're doing it wrong.
It's funny. It's the Jedi conundrum as well. It's like, what are we? Are we keepers of the peace or are we soldiers? Yeah. What's going on there? We'll probably be...
This is something that the show has tackled before in the episode where Mariner and Boimler have to set up the recruitment booth on that one planet. They don't want to be fighting wars, and they don't want to be seen as a quasi-military establishment. They want to be doing weird science shit. They love this stuff. But they're the ones with the ships. They're the ones with the power to protect. And so Starfleet is constantly getting drawn into that. So upon getting put in her place by Ma'a, Mariner realizes that he's right. There's no reason to argue this point with her. Cedo would say that Mariner was acting like an idiot for how she's been behaving lately. So Ma'a hands her back the pip that she threw at him earlier and says something in Klingon, which pretty much translates to,
honor your friend, slay your enemies, and study your, what is it, plans?
Yeah, sometimes it's plans.
They officially introduce themselves then. Ma'a observes that the storm is now over, so their battle can commence. But instead of attacking him, Mariner gives him a big old bear hug.
Klingons don't hug.
Klingons don't hug. They hate that.
Brothers don't shake hands. Brothers gotta hug.
I like that's a fun little callback because Worf, whenever someone tries to hug Worf, he's like, no. They start going back and forth because Mariner's like, no, we're friends now. We're friends. We're allies. We're gonna do this together. We're working together. And he's like, no, we have to fight. And she's like, no, we're friends. You're crazy. Come on, let's go, friend. And so they walk off arguing the status of their alliance.
We are not allies.
Yes, we are.
We are not.
Freeman, Shax, and Rutherford are finally getting into the bar after their long wait, and Rutherford loves it. But Freeman advises they need to hurry up and find the information broker fast. They locate the broker, and he is a weird-looking alien that moves and talks like it's actually a robot. Freeman asks if he can provide them the location of Nicholas Locarno, but he refuses and tells them to leave. Sparks fly as a glow comes from beneath his robes. Freeman is not going to be fooled what is clearly a puppet, so she grabs the broker and starts shaking him.
Tell me who your master is, you fake puppet piece of shit.
You're not supposed to shake the baby. That's everybody knows that.
I laughed pretty hard. It was such a funny moment because here I was expecting that this person to turn out to be a puppet, but no, it's just
and that's the double bluff because, and we'll get into it in the reference section. But I too was like, oh, it's another one of these puppet guys. That's great. I was like, oh no, he's got little legs and little arms.
So you can see a little chair on the table, and the broker starts flailing his tiny little arms and legs. Rutherford does a scan, and the guy has internal organs, so he's definitely real. Freeman realizes her error and apologizes. It's hard to tell who is and who isn't a puppet nowadays. Is this really a problem in Star Trek?
Puppets?
Yeah.
There is an episode of the original series where this exact puppet was used to not so much trick the Enterprise, but just hide the identity of the person they were really dealing with. Yeah, I mean, in Star Trek, I suppose it happened that one time.
Okay. Well, one is better than none, I suppose. So, once again, pissed off at the audacity of Starfleet, the broker says he will sell information about Locarno to anyone but them. The bounty hunter from earlier shows up again and promptly buys the intel from the broker. The team is then kicked out of the bar to jeers and boos from the patrons.
I have so many questions about this scene, but it is one of the funniest parts of the scene episodes. Back on our mystery planet, Mariner and Ma'a have made their way to the outpost to find a congregation of all the captains and first officers that from the missing ships. And they are all throwing down with each other. We've got Ferengi, Romulan, Bynар, Orion, and Cardassians, which, if you recall in previous episodes, I said that I wanted to see the scene where the Cardassian lower decks gets taken out, and I was denied. I'm like, the promise of Cardassians is right in front of me, and I got nothing. I'm so annoyed, but hey, at least they were there and included. But Ma'a has a plan, and it is to attack the Orion captain first. She is the most formidable, and with her out of the picture, the rest will scatter. But Mariner has a different plan. Attack is the easy way. She jumps out and calls a timeout. She tells them that fighting is not the way to figure out what's going on. She asks if anyone even knows who is responsible for them all being stranded here. The Orion claims that someone fed lies to her lower officers, which caused a mutiny and shut down their systems. Just like on the Klingon ship, the Ferengi captain confirms that the same thing happened on his ship. Everyone also kind of agrees, like, yeah, that sounds right. So Mariner insists that they should all work together. The Orion is not biting at this suggestion.
You're worse than the Romulans.
Hey,
The Orion starts to attack Mariner when suddenly Tendi jumps in to save the day.
Like a mouse.
Upon seeing Tendi, both Orion chicks just immediately drop to one knee because she's the mistress of the freaking winter constellations.
I'm glad that came up again, there it is,
Tendi tells her to stand down because an attack on Mariner is an attack on her family, and no one wants to incur the wrath of the warrior queen Shona and Bert. Mariner once again insists that they don't have to like each other, but until they get rescued, they need to work together. Otherwise, they won't be able to get revenge on who did this. They all come from different planets, but they all share one thing in common. They chose to travel into space and all of the dangers that come with it. If they can work together, nothing can stop them.
If we can't live together, we're going to die alone.
They all agree, some more reluctantly than others, and Tendi then explains that if they can update the beacon, they can send out a signal. But as she's explaining this, Mariner is suddenly beamed away. Ma'a takes over and tells them all that Mariner is honorable. They should believe her words and get to work because he now has a plan.
Meanwhile, Rutherford is bummed out that their mission was a failure.
Who knew a bunch of criminals would hate Starfleet?
I did.
The mission was actually a success. Just then, the bounty hunter from the entire episode shows up and takes off his helmet to reveal Lieutenant Billups.
I can't breathe in this thing.
Freeman knew that having uniformed officers would be the perfect distraction to allow Billups to get the intel they need without issue. So we cut back over to Sherbal to see the Klingon bird of prey and the mystery ship above the planet. The mystery ship warps away, and on the bridge of the Klingon ship, an officer calls out that there is a distress beacon active on the planet. The captain orders them to find and destroy the source of the signal. The ship descends on the planet, but the outpost is shielded by the mountains, which causes the bird of prey to have to get very close in order to fire. They destroy the outpost with ease, but not before the maroon officers and alien captains all jump onto the hull from the nearby cliff. They infiltrate the bird of prey, and Ma'a, Tendi, T'Lyn, and the Orion captain take the bridge and watch as Ma'a beats the mutineering captain into a pulpy reddish pinkish pile of meat on the floor. Very vivid description. Boimler rushes into the bridge to inform them that Mariner is not there. Where could she be?
Well, we flip over to New Axton, where Freeman, Shax, and Billups and Rutherford are searching this giant hangar bay, calling out for Nick Locarno. He doesn't appear to be there, but what they discover is much worse. On a nearby pegboard, they see a bunch of design schematics for the, wait for it, dun dun dun, the mystery ship.
What a twist.
We then cut to Mariner waking up on a bed in a very empty room.
What in the minimalist hell is...
She tries to pry the door open when suddenly it opens. She then tries to punch the figure at the door, who is bathed in shadow, but he dodges and reveals himself to be a very aged up Nick Locarno. The last 10 years have not been kind to him. He looks a lot older.
You could just tell, just basically from the facial hair, this guy does not.
No, he doesn't, which is weird because the show is implying that he's only a couple years older than Mariner because he was set to graduate that year. Like, oof, man. Hard living. Mariner immediately recognizes him and asks what he's doing there. And he responds, "We're going to cause some trouble together." And it stunned Mariner eyes to credits. To be continued. So, Mike, what did you think of this episode?
So this is an episode that all of your references really helped build some continuity and some context. I'm not going to lie, this episode kind of made me feel a little stupid. I don't know any of these other characters. Is this just a random guy that got mentioned just kind of in the backdrop a while ago and I just don't remember because sometimes I don't pay attention to this crap? Or is this something that happened on a different series that I've never seen? And this is something that is very much a wink to the fans, but I felt a little lost, more so in this episode than I have in other episodes this season. I still enjoyed it. I do like that we have a little bit of resolution for what's going on with this mystery ship. I'm just very curious to see how they're going to wrap this up.
That's fair. I figured that would be the issue, as it's been all season. whenever they lean into knowing your Star Trek as a crutch for the episode, it seems to be ones that you haven't been thrilled with. Whereas if like the converse with me, like I loved this episode. I thought it was everything I wanted. And it's references in a way that don't feel like Leo pointing at the camera. The Ceto thing is probably the biggest issue. You need to know more about her if you really want that emotional impact to hit. I feel like what I said earlier, that next week we're going to get more there, will probably help. But I'm also going to recommend that you watch Lower Decks before next week. And I would even recommend watching The First Duty before next week, even though Nick Locarno doesn't play a huge role in the episode. It might just be good to get that sense of the character.
No, I should for the fan.
For
Gotta
me,
do it for the
do
fan.
it for me. I'm sure you won't need to, but I think you might enjoy them because they're good episodes. My personal thoughts on this episode, the main one is that I think that I like in the end Mariner's explanation of what her problem is. There's a bit of a meta commentary. Mariner's essentially the audience who had a problem with Deep Space Nine and to a lesser extent all the new Star Trek properties. Previous shows were always about exploration and mysteries of the week. They solved problems. DS9 got really in the weeds with like war and how the galaxy isn't great. And it was very great for world building and expanding this universe. But in doing so, they had to break a whole bunch of Roddenberry's rules. And Mariners declare that this is not what Starfleet is every person who said in the 90s, this is not what Star Trek is. And everybody who said in the late 2010s about Discovery, this is not what Star Trek is. And I appreciate that they know that this is an issue, but also they kind of say, hey, yeah, it may not be what Star Trek is, but to ignore that side of Star Trek is to ignore the fact that we wanted to build this universe out and make it a place rather than just a series of one-offs. And I like that. And so it's nice that this funny cartoon show is able to point a finger at the fan base, but also say, like, you know, it's okay. You can not like those episodes. You can be upset by them, but you also have to understand that they exist and it is now a part of what makes this show great. My other big issue is why the F was Rutherford and Shax kept in the dark on this plan? Because when Billups pulls off his helmet, Shax is like, what? I'm like, you're the chief of security, dude. What is going on? Like, it should have been his plan. So I just thought that was absolutely bizarre.
It did seem a little bit odd. You are correct in that assessment.
But otherwise, I enjoyed this episode.
It's still funny. It's still a good episode. It's still tugged on the heartstrings, and it pushes this season long story to a point where it's like, okay, we now know who, now we just need to know why.
A lot to look forward to for next week. But I have made mention of a few references. What do you say we go and parse out the rest of those references for you?
How can you not know that Spider-Man first appeared in 1962's classic Amazing Fantasy number 15?
Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle. G.I. Joe!
Say the line, Bart.
I understood that reference.
In this segment, I will do my best to compile all the references, jokes, and Easter eggs that I can find. This was originally to show off how cool I am, but after a recent basketball conversation involving Eric Durant, I'm not so sure cool is the right word. Really, it's to help Mike understand why I think the F is so funny and to get his perspective. All right, so I mentioned at the beginning the title of the episode, The Inner Fight. This is a direct play on the episode The Inner Light, which was a TNG episode. We actually talked about it during the Wadi Chula box episode, that weird probe that blasts the Bajoran gift box. The Inner Light is the episode where that probe blasts the captain and he lives in a simulated life. 7 to 9. 7 to 9 is a former Borg. She was found by the Voyager and separated from the collective. She was given back her individuality and she became part of the crew. When they got back to Earth at the end of Voyager, she signed up to be a member of Starfleet, but Starfleet didn't want her because they didn't trust that she was a Borg. And that kind of set her off. So she left and joined a bounty hunter vigilante crew called the Fenris Rangers. They said in this episode that they were sending people to find certain Starfleet personnel. It's assumed that she's with the Fenris Rangers at this time, and so that's why they're sending someone out to get her. I really love her character and the changes that she goes through. So Beverly Crusher, that's the Doctor from The Next Generation. She's apparently doing like Doctors Without Borders for Starfleet in this time era. So that's why they have to go get her. Thomas Riker is the transporter clone of Commander William Riker. And the last we saw him was in a Cardassian prison at the end of an episode of Deep Space Nine, because he joined like a terrorist group called the Maquis. Thomas Riker was created when Will Riker was on a planet where an ion storm was preventing them from beaming. And apparently you can only beam off of this planet like once every like 7 years. So they tried to get Riker out. It wasn't working. So they made a second transport beam, and the second beam got him. But the first beam bounced back down to the planet, creating two Rikers. So they then find him in an episode of TNG. They go back to the planet to collect the data that they had to leave behind. And they get down there and there's another Riker who's like, "You guys finally came back for me. Cool." and Riker's on the away mission. He's like, "The fuck?" So then they kind of have to work out the whole, there's two of us now. He takes Riker's middle name as his first name at the end of the episode. And he's like, "I'll be Thomas. Why not?" Which is also, Boimler had a transporter clone of himself made, William, who was named William Boimler. And he went to serve on the Titan after Boimler got kicked back to the Cerritos. Nick Locarno has some more details. I mentioned that he was meant to be on Voyager, but because of the actions that he did, Jerry Taylor, the producer, said that he was too irredeemable to be on Voyager, so they created the character of Tom Paris, but they liked Robert Duncan McNeil so much that they kept him as the Tom Paris type. There is a rumor that I guess has not been 100% substantiated, but supposedly the writer who created Nick Locarno wanted to get paid if they kept using his character for Voyager. So rather than dealing with that, they just were like, "He's a new character now." But I guess they wouldn't really confirm that particular story. So it's just speculation. But also, Robert Duncan McNeil has gone on record to say that he played both Locarno and Paris completely differently. Locarno, he plays as a person who seems good, but deep down is bad. Whereas Paris, he plays as a good guy who just puts on an air of being bad because he had made mistakes in his past. So the uniforms having pockets. Rutherford goes, "Joke's on them. We don't have pockets to pick." Turns out they do have pockets to pick. This is a joke on Gene Roddenberry, who insisted throughout the original series and the Next Generation that they wouldn't have pockets in the future, and that it makes the uniforms look better without pockets. The only series to have pockets in the uniforms apparently is Enterprise, because it takes place before the original series. So being less futuristic, it's okay to have pockets. The bar was called Muds. Muds is a reference to the smuggler Harry Mudd, who is a character from the original series who showed up in 2 episodes. And he also shows up in Discovery. Rainn Wilson is who they cast to be the new Harry Mudd for the Discovery show. His episodes are kind of kooky. He's a bit of a con man. Oh, also, outside of that bar across from Mudd's, did you notice the Narge tree person?
That was a nice touch. I agree.
And when Boimler is sleeping, he says, "Teach me how to dance, Beverly Crusher." That is a reference to season 4, episode 11 of TNG. It's called Data's Day, where we learned that Dr. Crusher won a tap dancing competition at the academy. Data asks her to teach him to dance for the wedding that he's going to be attending.
Thank you, Doctor. I am now prepared to dance at the wedding.
Wedding?
And he doesn't realize that that's not the kind of dancing she knows how to do. So we get a whole holodeck scene where she teaches him how to tap dance. And it's really funny. They called her the dancing doctor.
That was a long time ago, and I don't want to be known as the dancing doctor again.
Mariner served on the USS Quito, which was stationed at Deep Space Nine during the Dominion War. I'm hoping that in the future we learn a little bit more about her time in the war, which might help further explain in compilation with her distress at losing her friend, that maybe that might be why a little bit too what is causing her to be so reckless. So the information broker with the little hands and little arms and is not a puppet.
The puppet, yeah.
This is a callback to TOS season 1, episode 10. This puppet was used to hide that the person that the Enterprise was going up against was a child. That child being played by Clint Howard. So they were talking to this fake robot over the view screen, but then when they finally beamed over to the mysterious ship that was threatening them, they found out that it was just a puppet, which is then why Freeman says, I feel like I remember this happening before. It was a direct reference to that. And then I don't know if this is a reference, but the bounty hunter suit that Billups wears looks like a cross between the Mandalorian and Black Manta from Aquaman. And I just thought it was funny that
yes,
it was very Mandalorian-esque. But those are all the references that I noticed. Did you want to pick out our favorite character?
Yeah, let's do
Let's do it. Head over to Nick and Mike's Miraculous Menaginarium.
I'll take you home and lock you in a nice little cage and never, never, ever let you out.
Do you imprison everything you like?
Of course.
He's so fluffy, I'm gonna die.
The Moopsie is Narja's favorite.
Oopsie.
In this segment, we pick a character from the episode who stood out to us and belongs in a safe and wonderful home, trapped behind glass, 2 windows down from the Moopsie.
Oopsie.
Mike, who was your favorite character this episode? There's a lot to choose from.
There is a lot to choose from, but for me, it kind of boiled down to who had the best mix of comedy and actual significance to the episode, and it was Ma'a. Just
excellent choice.
That scene between him and Mariner after the glass storm, best part of the episode. Even though I didn't really understand some of the parts that were happening, that doesn't change the fact that he's the one that tells her, snap out of it. Get over yourself. You dishonor the memory of those who have passed because of the way that you're acting right now. So I appreciated that. It was very hard for me not to pick the information broker, but if he was a puppet, I probably would have picked him, but he wasn't.
Well, once again, you have mentioned mine as the one you were gonna pick, because mine is the information broker. I agree with you. Everything you said about Ma'a is 100% correct. And I almost picked him for mine. But the information broker with his little arms and his little legs, waving them all around. And Rutherford's like, he's got internal organs and everything. That just made my day. Like, it was so funny. And he has a little throne that he was sitting on.
I think the part that I like the best is when the information broker gets put down and he says, you know what? I'm going to sell the information on Locarno to anybody but you.
Yeah.
At this point.
I think he's like, I wasn't even going to sell this information to anybody. Nobody was going to get it. I was going to keep his secret. But like, fuck you guys.
Exactly. Just the fact that they thought that he was a puppet was almost enough to sway me.
And then when they put him down, he like goes from being like animated to like mechanical, and his neck shifts funny and he speaks more robotic. Like, it's so great. What do we have coming up next week, Mike?
So our next episode of Star Trek Lower Decks will be the season 4 finale, which will be in your feed next Tuesday. The episode title is still yet to be determined. But that will be the next episode in your podcast feed. Tune in Thursday as we bring you Loki Season 2, Episode 4, Heart of the TVA. The TVA's Loom reaches catastrophic failure, but Loki, Mobius, and Sylvie have a He Who Remains variant. I don't know about you, but I have thoughts on this episode. Boy,
Yeah, me
do
too.
I. Some good, but mainly more confused.
Oh, so many confused.
Until next time, please like, subscribe, share, open up to an enemy about your emotional damage, and rate us 5 stars in your listening app of choice. Also, you can find us on social media. I am at mlhilty2452 at Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Serialized, which is letterboxed for TV.
And you can find me on Blue Sky, Twitter, and Letterboxd at Jagged2319. You can also contact the show at geekspeaklouder@gmail.com or on Blue Sky by searching Geeks Speak Louder Than Nerds. Join our Facebook group and follow us on Twitter at Geeks Speak Loud because the was just too many characters for Elon Musk.
Thanks, Guy. Appreciate that.
Yeah, geeks can't speak louder on Twitter. They can only speak loud.
They just loud. They're just loud.
Until next time, I'm Nick Farrow.
And I'm Mike Hilty. Thank you for tuning in to Geek Speak Louder Than Nerds. Catchphrase.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because Venus is not the one of the ones in the middle. Like Mercury, Venus, Earth.
Fair enough. Listen, man, I haven't sang the Planets song since first grade, so I don't really remember it that well. But no, we had a little song. It went something like this. The planets, we're studying the planets, Mercury and Jupiter and Mars. That's all I know.